Think back about 11 months ago when the world changed and how you presented had to change too. Maybe you felt a little like I did, where I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to think about technology, video, audio, camera, microphone, lighting, screen sharing, background, clothing. How am I going to practice? Zoom bombing, distractions. It's so distracting. And other people are multitasking too. Oh, eye contact. Oh, yeah, look at the webcam. How am I going to engage and interact? How am I going to make that great first impression? Maybe you had some of those thoughts if you could get past the panic. I know Vitalia with her new business model was thinking, oh no, everything's changing. Well, today I'm going to give you some tips and strategies as to how you can make a great first impression online. From looking professional online to wielding tools of engagement to taming the technology monster. Just so you won't have to worry about taking copious notes, at the end of the presentation, I will give you a link to a resource page that has a version of this presentation as well as several other resources. How can you look professional online? Really, in this group, you pretty much have it down mostly. So take a look. This is kind of how I look right now. I took this picture yesterday and then I did a few changes. Remember the spot the difference games when you were a kid where you could say, well, what's different about this photo? I will tell you the next photo, you should see quite a few differences. Yep, see that? So what kind of differences do you see? Go ahead and just put it in the chat. Just a few little things. Okay. Background, yuck. Of course, that background. What's really funny is that's actually a virtual background. I looked for messy office online. Okay, aside from the clutter, what else do you see that's different? Too close, right? I'm way too close to the camera. The lighting, yeah, the lighting is much worse. Now, you might not have noticed some other changes I made. I'm looking down, that's right. I'm not looking at the camera. The clothing is different. You can't see my hair because I got too close, but I actually put it up in a messy bun. So, we're professionals. We aren't going to look like this, right? But I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at your own video right now. And think about what is something you could fix, if not right now, for your next presentation. How is your camera angle? Ideally, your webcam would be about the same level as your eyes or even just slightly above for a more flattering view. And you can do that by elevating your laptop, for example, on a box. Then there's the lighting. You don't want to be backlit. You don't want to have any too harsh shadows. Now, I have challenges actually with maybe being a little too lit and with my light that's up there, but see what you can improve. Distracting background. Look around the edges. Don't just look at your face now, look at your background. Poor clothing choices. Probably nobody here has really poor clothing choices, but solid colors are better. You probably want to stay away from white because white can glare. Lack of eye contact when speaking. As Mark said, you make eye contact by looking into the webcam. So when I look at the webcam, it's like everybody has a front row seat and I'm making eye contact. So try looking at the webcam when you're speaking. Now I'm curious, what might be some other ways to look bad online? And just quickly put in the chat box some other ways maybe you've seen people do something that makes them look bad online. Let's see, I'll wait a moment to see what people might put in the chat. Fumbling to slide share. Yeah, that happens a lot. Glasses glare, hard to fix. It can be better if the next time you get glasses, you get the non-glare coating. It doesn't fix it totally, but it helps. Eating sandwiches. Yes, if you're going to eat, at least turn off your video. Now, I think it's okay to get a drink of water, but consider using a glass and not using a bottle, because I think bottles look really kind of low class, you know. Plus, it's way easier to spill if you use a bottle. Other people appearing, etc. So I had just thought of the eating, flashing people. Now, this is when someone's like checking their email, and there are ways you can do that where you have a darker background so it's not so obvious. But of course, when you're presenting, you shouldn't be checking your email. Over the top virtual backgrounds. Okay, let's talk about the disappearing body parts. I have a green screen behind me, so my background is fairly crisp. However, if you don't have an actual green screen and you use a virtual background, you might, if you haven't done this, I'm sure you've seen it, where someone will turn aside and their head will disappear. So don't use a virtual background if it's going to make you look wonky. All right, space around head when moving using a virtual background. So I think what you mean is that there's like some extra space because of just how the virtual background tries to make up the difference. I do know if you have really big hair or fuzzy hair, virtual backgrounds have some challenges with that. Let's look at how you can engage. And you'll be happy to know these tips are whether you're online or not, if you're doing an in-person presentation as well. So the good news is that much is the same in person and virtually. You always want to start with why. What's your why? What's your point for giving this presentation? And then why does your audience care? You need to address some pain point, offer some benefit, so they will want to listen to you. Some tools of engagement, whatever the platform, include having openings that get attention and closings that leave an impact, telling stories that engage the emotions, and having some effective visuals. Let's look at openings and closings. The openings and closings are like the bookend of your speech, where you open with a way to break their attention from whatever they were doing to focusing on what you're saying. And the closing should leave them with something to think, feel, or do differently. Here is a format that I will often use for longer presentations. I call it the 3 Ps. You can start with the 3 Ps, where you do something at the beginning that's pep to get their attention. It could be telling a story. It could be opening with a startling statistic, just something to get their attention. Maybe it's a question. That often will get people's attention if you engage their imaginations right away. So I started this presentation with having you think back to how you felt when everything changed with the pandemic. Then you want to promise them something, to state a benefit. For example, I said you would learn some strategies and tips to making a great first impression online. And then you want to give them a path and preview your points. And I gave you 3 basic points that I would be covering. Now, when you get to the end, you can end with the 3 Ps in reverse. I'd say this is slightly less critical than at the beginning, but if possible, you want to summarize your points. That is exactly what Stephen did on his knife demonstration. He did summarize his main points. You want to revisit your benefit, the so what for the audience. And you want to end typically with some sort of call to action to leave them with something to do. And I'll go back to there. Stories. Stories will engage like almost nothing else. Stories can put facts into an emotional context. Facts tell, but stories sell. Stories are also concrete. They will take something that might be an abstract concept and bring it to life. Just like when Jane talked about the example with the student and the teacher, that made it a much more concrete concept. So let's have an example of a story. Now, if you were at yesterday's meeting or have seen me talk in Toastmasters, you might be familiar with this opening story. This is me at age 3. Big teeth, big smile, and bad hair. Fortunately, some things do change. And one of the things that changed for me at the age of 3 was when I discovered the power of the spoken word. My mother brought me to work to meet her boss and coworkers. And one look at her boss, and I was in awe. She was perhaps the ugliest woman I have ever seen. Long, pointy chin, hooked nose, bushy eyebrows over beady eyes. Mom, she looks just like the Wicked Witch of the West. Complete silence until my mother turned to me and said, Diane, don't you mean like Glenda, the Good Witch? Hello? No. Glenda was pretty. Fortunately, the boss lady laughed and all was well. And I had a newfound power, the power of the spoken word. Now we're going to have a little pop quiz. And this will, if you can't type fast, don't even bother, just answer in your head. But in the chat, go ahead and put your answers to these questions. How old was I? Well, Vitalia got it, David. Okay, yeah. People remembered I was 3. Where did my mom bring me? That's right. My mom brought me to work. Whom did I think the boss lady looked like? That's right. The Wicked Witch, ugly, Wicked Witch of the West. Whom did my mother try to get me to say the boss lady looked like? Glenda, the Good Witch. That's right. What new power did I have? That's right. The power of my voice, the power of the spoken word. So congratulations, you guys were paying attention. But that really goes to prove the point that when you're telling a story, people will key in on little details. And if you can wrap your statistics in a story, people are much more likely to remember it. Very quickly, a few storytelling basics for when you create your own stories in your presentations. This is what I call the shape of a story with a happy ending. See, the end is a little bit higher. You have to have a setup, a little bit of context so people know like, wait, what's this about? And they can at least start to imagine something. Then very quickly, you need to have a challenge or a conflict, some rising action, and then a turning point, falling action, and then a resolution. Now, looking at my story, the setup was, I tell you that when I was 3 years old, my mother brought me to work. And the challenge or conflict was when I said that the boss looked like a witch. The rising action was when my mother pleaded, "Don't you mean Glenda?" The turning point was when the boss laughed. The falling action was when I said, "All is well." And I had a new power, the power of the spoken word. When you're creating a business story, you do not want to be the hero of your story. Your client or customer should be the hero of the story. And you or the service or product should be the guide on the side that helps your client or customer become the hero in their own story. A quick example. Several years ago, a company hired me to work with a technical lighting engineer who was going to be speaking at a conference. And they were very concerned that he would embarrass the company. Among other things, one of his big challenges was that he said all the time. So when I met with him, I had him do the first 3 minutes of his presentation. I recorded him, and then I had him watch it. In 3 minutes, he said about 30 ums. He realized he indeed had a problem and agreed to work on this problem. So what I did in the next few minutes is I took a Coke can and I would hit it every time he said And within 2 times of doing that, he was down to only 3 ums in 3 minutes. And 2 weeks later, he contacted me and said his presentation went great and he didn't stumble with filler words like I wasn't the hero, he was the hero in his own story. Let's take a look at effective visuals. So there's 4 basics of effective slides. You want 1 idea per slide, minimal text, engaging visuals, and relevant content on your slides. So what do you think the number 1 problem is when it comes to slides? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Too busy, verbose, too much words, too much info. Yep, you've sat through those presentations too, haven't you? Too much information is a problem. Now, maybe you didn't even notice significance. Significance can be lost when there's too much information. So what do you think the number 2 problem is? No, don't bother putting that in the chat. Let's experience problem number 2. Here is a list of 12 virtual presenter basic competencies. Number 1, okay, I'm not going to do that to you. It just becomes blah, blah, blah. Problem number 2, people don't listen well when they're reading. Here's a little better. If you simply have your bullet points come in one at a time and just speak to them as they come up. So that's better than having everything all at once. Even better is to use a picture. Talking about how to mute and unmute with a picture, maybe even demonstrate it. Often the best visual is you. You don't have to start your presentation with your slides. You can start with the video of you. You can even stop now and then to engage with your audience. And if I had a longer presentation, which I've done in the past with this, I would be stopping a little more often to engage with you, but I'm just going to get through this content. Let's talk about taming that technology monster. When it comes to screen sharing, you don't want to fumble it, right? So here's a suggestion. Get your content and presentation ready to share. So for example, I'm trying something new this time, and I am using the presenter view. Now I have 3 screens in front of me. So I have the slides up on one screen. I have the presenter view right in front of me, and then I have nothing on the other screen. But whether you do it that way or whatever way you do it, get your content ready well before you share. Then hit the green share button. Select your content. Do all of this before you start speaking, but don't yet hit that blue share button. Wait until you're ready. And then when you want to share your slides without fumbling, just hit the blue share button and you will come across as being much more smooth in your presentation as you're sharing your slides. When you share video, again, you want to share your screen. It's important that you either check optimize screen sharing for video clip, but at the very least, make sure you share your computer sound, because you'll hear the video, but if you haven't shared your computer sound, your audience will not. Then there's some fun advanced screen share techniques that you could use, and I suggest trying these out on your own first. So you can use slides as your background, which is an interesting thing to do. So here's an example where I was using slides as my background, my virtual background. I think this is a cool idea, but there are some challenges. Although you can adjust the size and position of your picture, you can't use animations. Like you can't have bullet points come in one at a time. And your video is also not mirrored. Now, most people will check to have their video mirrored. So if you move a certain direction, it looks like that's the direction you're moving, just as a comfort thing. But you can't do that when you are using slides as a background. Another option for using slides as a background is if you only have a few slides you're sharing, you can upload your slides as a virtual background if you're just using a few. And I'm just going to see if I can actually, let's see if I can do this. Okay, I am going to, in yesterday's presentation, you saw, if you were there, what you saw me do is during the presentation, when I did the story, I actually used my slides as my background for just the story, where I told the story, and then I had 2 slides that I had uploaded with the background. So you can make your own slide backgrounds very easily using PowerPoint. You just add the image and you can create your own background using the widescreen PowerPoint format, saving it as a JPEG, and then adding the image to your virtual backgrounds. So I actually really like this approach if you've only got a couple slides or just a few. Another advanced screen sharing technique would be to share a portion of your screen. You don't have to share all your screen. And again, you can set this up in advance so that you have the right part of your screen being shared before you actually hit share. You can also share content from a second camera. This is very helpful if you're If you're demonstrating something, how to do something, for example, demonstrating how to use knives or how to do a particular origami fold. So this was when I was showing someone how to do something using shared content from a second camera, where you can still see my face if you want to do it that way, but you can also see what I'm sharing. You can also use your phone as a webcam. If you want to use a second webcam, because maybe the webcam on your laptop isn't that great, usually the webcam on a phone or the camera on a phone is very good. So there's an app called EpoCam Pro, which you can purchase and then set up to use your phone as a webcam. There are many additional tools available that would be fun sometime in a tipster tip something to actually show how to use the whiteboard. We had a Zoom call with our granddaughters this last weekend and we played around with the whiteboard, and I can see some applications for the whiteboard as well as annotations where you can have your audience annotate on the screen with you. Don't have time to do that now, but maybe that'll be a future speech on how you might use that in your speaking business as well. If you're familiar with Prezi, there is a Zoom integration where you can use Prezi and have your slides as your virtual background. If you have hearing impaired people, you can use third-party integration and have closed captioning. Of course, you can live stream to YouTube and Facebook. I know that District 106 Toastmasters has live stream business meetings, for example, to YouTube, so people who aren't maybe at the meeting for voting can also see what happens at the meetings. There's also calendar and scheduling integrations. For example, I use Doodle for people booking appointments with me. And when they book the appointment, they automatically get my Zoom link. So it's very easy. A few tips. You want to check connectivity and practice the platform. I think that, so I'm using this for the first time, this presenter view. So I'm learning here. This is a great place to try stuff out as you're learning. You want to check your upload, download speed, and connectivity. Now, almost everybody has great download speed. It's the upload speed that can be a problem. If you have a glitchy video or there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between the sound and the video, your upload speed is probably the problem. You can go and Google speed test and then do a speed test. And if your upload speed is not at least 5 to 6 megabytes per second, you probably need to upgrade your internet plan so that you can have a quality experience on online presentations. Of course, you want to know the platform and practice with others. That's what something like Power Club is great for. You can try things out, like I'm trying this out for the first time using Presenter View today. And if you mess up, no big deal. Nobody's paying us. So this is a perfect place to practice the platform. But you can also practice by yourself. Just open up Zoom, practice. You can even record it to watch how your practice went. Have backup plans in case something doesn't work. Do you have a second computer, or could you even do it on your phone? Use a checklist. Now, one of the items in the resources that you'll be getting in just a moment is a virtual presentation checklist. I use it before every presentation still, although I get to go through it really quickly now. But I always make sure I have something like my glass of water, because nothing's worse than presenting and realizing you have a tickle in your throat. And now for the resource page. Okay, I'll put it in the chat now. Let me do that. And it is in the chat. So if you want to click on that, save it, copy it, or whatever, of course, it can always be sent later as well. This will give you lots of resources, the checklist, the presentation itself, sort of a different version, but very similar to this, and lots of videos on how to do things with PowerPoint in your presentations as well. So let me ask you, how will you make your presentation online a gift to your audience? How will you look professional online? How will you wield tools of engagement? And how will you tame the technology monster?